What it is, what it do, it's your boy Malu, and I'm coming to you with a brand new episode from Drink Mo. Did you know our nation's only successful slave revolt led to black people being border patrol for Mexico to keep white people out? Let's discuss it.
Drink more water, darling.
Oftentimes, the true and triumphant history of Cinco de Mayo gets lost in the sauce of margaritas and sombreros. Consequently, the same can be said for this historical tale of black triumph over domination and our refusal to be slaves in this nation. Have you ever heard the saying, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend"? Well, our story begins with this sentiment. During slavery times, one of our provisionary partners was Spain. The U.S. and Spain had beef. It really started with the British and the Spanish having beef, but it really just flowed over after the American Revolution. You see, the Spanish owned Florida, and although the Spanish themselves held human beings as slaves, they strategically passed a royal decree in 1693, granting asylum for runaway slaves on two conditions. Condition number one, they had to become Catholic. Condition number two, they had to join the military. Shit. This gave black people well over 100 years to escape to freedom to the South. So often we think of the Underground Railroad and always see it going north to, the Ohios or the Canadas. But a lot of people don't talk about this Southern Underground Railroad in Spanish Florida. But this all came to a screeching halt in 1821, largely due to one man named Andrew Jackson. After invading Florida and driving out the Spanish, Andrew Jackson and the United States government sought out to legitimize their brand new state. And although the Spanish basically left willingly, there was a lot of indigenous people and a lot of black people who had called Spanish Florida their home. So they decided to fight for their freedom, because almost all of them came out of slavery. The Second Seminole War officially began in 1835. Now, it's called the Second Seminole War, but in fact, it is historically known as the Negro War, because it was all black, baby. These black Seminoles were led by a brother named John Horse. John Horse, historically speaking, goes by one of three names, and his main one is John Horse. The second is John Cavallo, and the third is Gopher John. Once again, we got to remember, a big part of them coming to Spanish Florida was they had to join the Spanish military. So a lot of these brothers and sisters already had military training just living with the Spanish. So when the U.S. came in to invade and take over Florida, these cats was ready, bro. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't your average slave revolt where we got to pick up hammers and hoes to defend ourselves. Nah, these cats was strapped up. And that concludes part one. Part two drops Wednesday on Cinco de Mayo. Stay tuned. What it is, what it do, it's your boy Malu, and I'd like to welcome you to part two of how black people became border patrol for Mexico. Let's go.
Sisters. Drink more water, darling.
Niggas. Whiteys. Crackers.
And everybody in between, peep the scene. We left off right before we got into the war. Now, the honest truth is, we could do a whole video itself on just the war. But, in the sake of time, let's just touch on a few key facts, specifically how this thing began. So, first thing to know is that this was Florida's longest and most expensive war in the history of the state. And here's a quote from an actual soldier on what got the war started. The government is in the wrong, and this is a chief cause of the preserving opposition of the Indians, who have nobly defended their country against our attempts to enforce a fraudulent treaty. The natives use every means to avoid war, but were forced into it by the tyranny of our government. That's their words, not ours. And now, here's the actual act that put the war into place. So it all started with General Dade. You might have heard of him.
Going down in Dade County.
General Dade was trying to march his men from Tampa to Ocala. Now this is about 100-mile march, right? And these cats must have really thought shit was sweet. Well, General Dade actually got bodied by the Black Seminoles. His whole fleet got wiped. 3 cats survived in a place now known as Bushnell, Florida. There was literally only 3 surviving members of that war, of the soldier side. And of the 3, 1 actually died en route of escaping. So there's only 2 survivors of 110 soldiers. And that's what really got the war popping. But remember, if they would have followed their own treaty that they had us sign, this would have never happened. Once it became evident that this was not going to be a war won by the Americans, they again sought to get these Black Seminoles to the negotiating table. This time, they agreed. And why did we agree? We got to understand what was the stipulations. The main stipulations for the blacks in the Second Seminole War was that they want to be ensured that they would not be enslaved again if they left Florida, which by a temporary sense was true and was held up. And this is actually really similar to the story of the Garífunas, which we'll actually be discussing next week. Make sure you tune in. Oftentimes in history class, we hear about this event called the Trail of Tears. Seldomly do we ever envision African Americans along this Trail of Tears. And a lot of these people were traveling from Central Florida to Oklahoma. That's 13,000 miles that they had to traverse. And upon reaching Oklahoma, you could imagine it wasn't balling. Think about Oklahoma today. Now think about Oklahoma 180 years ago. It was terrible. But these Black Seminoles, who had already been through so much, knew how to make the most out of nothing. So we got there in 1838, but once again, the Americans could not keep their word. So after being in Oklahoma for less than 10 years, they fuck us over again. By 1848, the United States Attorney General gave in to slave lobbyists and demanded the disarmament of the Black Seminoles. The Black Seminoles, led by John Horse again, was like, damn this, we gonna go to Mexico. And a big part of that has to do with a brother named Vicente Guerrero. This brother was actually Mexico's first black president, and he finalized the ending of slavery in Mexico in 1829. And you see, we might not have had social media back then, but when a nation ended slavery, that word got spread, and it got spread fast. Now, mind you, from the Seminole Reservation of Oklahoma to Mexico is about 700 miles. They already traveled 1,300, so they're now pushing 2,000 miles. So when they got there, and white people still pursued them to make them slaves again, that's how Black people, after leading the only successful slave revolt in U.S. history, became Mexico's border patrol to keep white people out and to sustain their freedom. But hey, don't take it from me. Take it from a living ancestor that's currently in Mexico.
Nosotros nos llamamos los negros mascogues. Los antepasados de nosotros fueron negras, nosotros somos negras. Según las pláticas que oímos de los antepasados, creo que ellos lucharon, ¿verdad?, para dejarnos esta tierra. Y estamos orgullosas, ¿verdad? Me siento orgullosa de ser negra, de pertenecer a esa sangre de negra.
Drink more water, darling.